want to welcome everybody today. And there's a lot of exciting, a lot of intense things going on in the world today. Think about this. Just for a minute, put yourself in the shoes of an Afghan American teenager living here in Sacramento who earlier this summer thought it would be great to take an airplane ride to Afghanistan and visit relatives. You're probably aware that there's the numbers are contradictory, or they're not consistent, but there's anywhere from 24 to 30 Afghan American young people trapped in Afghanistan. And buying a ticket, that's one of the things about tickets. I flew down to Arizona 2 weeks ago for Pacific Union Conference constituency meeting and a ministerial council, and only one out of my 4 flights was the way I bought it. Only one. And one of them didn't even happen. I ended up an extra night in Phoenix. And it was frustrating. So even when things are going fairly well, these flights don't work well. So when you buy a flight to a country like Afghanistan, you got to have faith that everything's going to stay on schedule and you're going to get out. And this group of students, all from the same school district, got stranded. Think about if you were in their shoes and you find out your flight is not going to happen and there's all kinds of chaos at the airport, and you're trying to figure out, I got to get to the airport, I got to get out of Afghanistan because I don't want to be stuck here. And you would have this sense as each day goes by and you're not making any progress, my time is running out. Now, it's possible, not likely, it's possible that some of those students did want to stay there. But they came to America for their safety some time ago. Their families did. They're not too likely to be safe now because they would be viewed as on the wrong side. Maybe someone has family connections and they're going to get through it okay. But I would say that the majority probably had this sinking feeling as time was running out. And I know lots of people are praying for these individuals. But time ran out on them, and we don't know what's going to become of them. And in fact, not just them. Think of the thousands of Afghans that had taken the American side, that had helped the Americans, that got stuck there, and they don't know what's going to happen to them. So when we think of time running out, there's an illustration that just happened, well, I wouldn't say before our eyes, but on the television screen, right in our time, in our world. So that raises a question. It raises a question for me. This is an interesting saying by Sir Walter Scott, because Walter Scott was trying to point out the things that human beings can't do a thing about. What waits for no man? He said, time and tides wait for no man. So those of you that have experience on the coast and no tides, you know there's not a thing you can do. They come in, they come in. They go out, they go out. And time and tides don't wait for anybody. So is time running out for the world? Is time running out for us? Is time running out for Adventist Christians to actually do what God put us here to do? You are aware that the purpose of the Seventh-day Adventist Church has only been mildly fulfilled? That the real purpose of God for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the real purpose, the critical moment in history, hasn't come yet. And you and I, we get to be a part of that most critical moment. Of course, you have to have courage for it, right? You need courage. Are there signs that we are near the end of the world? Let's look at some basic ones. Let's go to Matthew 24. We're not going to dwell on this that long, but we're going to look at some things quickly here. In Matthew 24, verse 3, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked this question right out. What shall be the sign of thy coming in the end of the world? They just asked it right out. And his first response in verse 4 is, take heed that no man deceive you. What does that tell you? If that's the thing he starts with, what does that tell you about those who are living when these signs are all around us? It means it's very hard to know who's telling the truth. It's very hard to know. And, sometimes people might wonder why Pastor Mike and I and Pastor Chris don't spend more time talking about current events. You want to know why? Because almost everybody that talks about current events proves to be wrong when it doesn't go the way they said it would. And so we kind of hold back and say, well, we're not going to get up and create some false excitement. I mean, there are some people who've been talking about the coming National Assembly Law for 30 years like it's tomorrow. And they just never learn. Now, does that mean it's never going to come? No, it's going to come. But you can't jump on everything and roll with it to try to create some interest and excitement. You have to sometimes be patient. So Jesus said, take heed that no man deceive you, because it's very hard sometimes when you see things happen in this world to know what that will result in a little farther down the road, because you know why? We don't have the gift of prophecy. If God hasn't told us, we just run the risk of making fools out of ourselves when we try to get too cocky and predict things. And there's plenty of people that do. All right, so let's look at verse 7. Verse 6 talks about wars and rumors of wars. Verse 7 talks about nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famine and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Do we have plenty of famine? Yeah. Earthquakes? Yeah. Earthquakes have always been, but they have increased dramatically over the past few decades. And famine is unprecedented. Do you remember when they had that Feed the World rock concert some years ago? I don't know. I'm only going back to then because at that time, statistics said that half of the world wasn't getting enough to eat. I don't know if it's still the same, worse or better, but I'm sure it's a pretty significant problem still. What's a pestilence? Could a coronavirus be a pestilence? I heard a no and I heard a yes. See, all right, so here we got difference of opinion, and that's fine. The majority said yes, that coronavirus could be a pestilence. So maybe let me make it a little easier for you. Could any disease be a pestilence? Okay. All right, so when the cholera epidemic went across the cities of the East in the 1850s, was that a pestilence? And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because when I explain what was going on in that, you're going to realize how easy we have it right now. All right, so let's, verse 9 refers to persecution. Then shall they deliver you up and be afflicted and shall kill you. You'll be hated. This is talking to Christians. Many will betray or be offended with one another, hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many. So false prophets. Iniquity, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So you got to hang in there, right? And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. To me, that's the greatest sign of the end, when the gospel goes to the whole world. But it's a little hard for us to know. We can know that we have work going in countries, but only God knows when it's reached the whole world. And it says here that when it has, the end will come. God's not waiting for more earthquakes. He's not waiting for more crime. He's not waiting for more diseases. He's not waiting for more famine. He's waiting for the gospel to go to the whole world. And he says when that happens, he will come. All the other things aren't connected directly to his coming. God's waiting for us a lot more than he's waiting for earthquakes. All right, so let's see. Let's go to verse 24. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. This is a very interesting verse because it says that the only people who won't be deceived are the very elect. I wonder who the very elect are. I'll come back and tell you who it is later. So it goes on to say, behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. That's spiritualism. That's like seances. Don't go for this stuff. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. All right, let's go to Luke. Luke has a parallel passage, but he says some things a little differently. Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21, and we'll pick it up with verse 5. So we saw several signs in that passage in Matthew. Persecution, hatred, false prophets, false Christs, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes, deception everywhere. By the way, I don't know how strong to emphasize this, but since deception is everywhere and it's hard to know who's telling the truth, can you understand why a pastor should be careful not to be too sure of himself about some things? Can you understand that? Because pastors who are too sure are going to mislead their people. Because God has not revealed everything to us in perfect detail, sometimes we have to be humble and wait till we get a better understanding. You know, there was an Indian chief that said, time discovers truth. And you know something? I can look back through my years in the Adventist church and I can remember things that were said with certainty by the majority of people that time has proven to be baloney. When we are patient, time reveals things. When we're impatient, then we get gullible and we believe things too easily. And then we run with it and make a complete fool of ourselves. All right, so Luke 21, verse 25. He describes the signs differently, or at least there's different ones here. They're kind of interesting. It says, and there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, and the sea and the waves roaring. Let's just stop and think about that verse for a minute. Distress of nations with perplexity. The Greek here is in the context of economic distress, poverty, downturns of economies, people losing jobs, that kind of distress. And it says here that, well, the next verse says, men's hearts failing them for fear. And the sea and the waves roaring, what does that make you think of? Well, we just had Hurricane Ida, but the sea and the waves roaring makes me think more of a tsunami. You know, that's pretty powerful. But it says that the distress in the world would be so heavy and so intense, building up a little bit at a time, that people would start to get this state of fearfulness that would kind of sneak up on them. Have you felt it? Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Yeah, I'm going to make a little confession here. I have struggled with a little bit of fear in more recent, the past year. But my fear isn't related to the coronavirus. I realize that, you could test positive, you could get sick, you go to the hospital, and I had an aunt die of it. But she already was almost dying of 2 or 3 other things, so we knew if she got it, it wouldn't have taken anything to put her over the edge. And when she got it, we all knew it was going to happen. And it did. So lots of people go to the hospital. So something's going on, and it's not fake. What exactly it is might be up for debate, but it's not fake. It's real. People have died. And so, but that's not the thing that's concerned me. The thing that's concerned me is the way I'm seeing my country change. That concerns me a lot more than disease right now. Because when people can riot in cities and destroy public buildings and government officials won't charge them and protect them, we've lost a sense of law and order. And people argue, but what's constitutional, what's not constitutional? I'm telling you right now, most of America doesn't even know what the Constitution says. I taught U.S. government to high school seniors. I spent more time in the Constitution than most people, and I'm telling you right now that most of our politicians spend most of their time having unconstitutional arguments and pushing an unconstitutional agenda. And so I'm worried about what's happening to my country because I see it falling apart. It's very close to no longer being the United States of America. Now, I'm kind of speaking maybe as a little bit of a passionate patriot at the moment. Guess I better scale it back a little. Because as a Seventh-day Adventist minister who grew up in this country, I understand the importance of the First Amendment of separation of church and state. I understand the importance of all the Bill of Rights and building a free country where I can worship with a free conscience. And those things are being eroded. And we are very close to no longer having the United States of America the way I always knew it growing up. I'm not claiming it was a perfect country. I'm not claiming it. I mean, when they had the Constitutional Convention and the Northern delegates couldn't come to an agreement with the Southern delegates about what to do about slavery except to leave it in place, at the time they made that decision, the cotton gin wasn't invented yet. Cotton wasn't king yet. And they made the mistake of assuming that within 20 years, slavery would die out on its own because it was doing that at the time. It was dying out on its own. And so in the Constitutional Convention, they thought slavery would be gone in 20 years. And so they decided not to try to tackle it there because if they tried to tackle it there, they wouldn't have been able to put together a constitution and start a country. And then the cotton gin was invented, and then cotton became big, and all of a sudden slavery mattered a lot more, and then they had a big problem on their hands. And you'd be interested to know that our early pioneers, the early Seventh-day Adventists, when they went to Revelation 13:11, when it talks about the beast coming up out of the earth, the lamb like horns, but then he spoke like a dragon, they said, this is the irony of our own country. They said it at their time. Because this country stands for freedom, for Christianity, in fact, for any religion. And they said, but not for the slave. And they said, on this point, the country's already speaking like a dragon. The early Adventist pioneers said the United States was already speaking as a dragon because it was tolerating slavery. But at the same time, they said it's a beast with lamb-like horns. It was kind of a contradiction. So our early pioneers never justified slavery. In fact, did you know our early pioneers didn't like Abraham Lincoln because they didn't think he was moving fast enough to let the slaves go? They thought he was playing too much politics. Interesting stuff. That wasn't part of my sermon, by the way. All right, I'm going to take a little risk here. All right, coronavirus. As a sign, are some making too much of it? Are some not discerning the times? All right, let's get a little perspective. I said I was going to say something about the cholera epidemic in the 1850s in the eastern cities of America. That was practically the only place there were cities. But in the cholera epidemic of the 1850s, we have an eyewitness account from a lady named Ellen White, because they were doing a printing press in Rochester at the time. And when the cholera epidemic was hitting, all night long and in the morning, mostly in the morning, they heard wagons going by outside their house with the printing press, because those wagons were stopping at every street corner to load up boxes with dead people in them. Rough coffins or caskets, just quickly made boxes. And at night, people, when somebody died, they would just bring out the box and put it on the corner of the street. And then the wagons would come by all day and just keep loading up at street corners. And the wagons were going to the cemeteries in a steady train all day long. She saw it with her own eyes. And she talked about hearing the wheels and how worried they were about their own health. And they lost some of their workers. So when you look at that, I don't know how to say it, but that's 10 times, 50 times more traumatic than anything we're dealing with. And then, of course, you keep hearing about the 1918-19 Spanish flu. 2 million, I believe, died in the United States and 50 million in the world. So the question is, what's any different or worse with the coronavirus? Well, as I said before, the United States itself is very different. The way the people respond to these things is very different. Because disease now is politicized greatly compared to the 1850s, when everyone's just trying to survive, and there wasn't a big bunch of spin doctors on television and the radio and the internet all the time. And in the 1918-1919 Spanish flu, people were just trying to survive. It wasn't all about what's going to go in the press. What are we going to tell the people? What do the people need to know? What do the people need to do? Everybody was just trying to do their best with it, going to doctors and stuff. Now, it's a big PR thing. It's a big media extravaganza. And as I said, people look at the Constitution differently now, so things are very different. You know, there's a question that many people have. Many people want to know, is it a man-made virus? Doctors and scientists, they don't agree on many things about the virus or about the vaccine. And what's frustrating to me is I can listen to a really intelligent scientist, doctor, explain one point of view, and then you can listen to another one that says exactly the opposite. And I don't have the scientific training to tell which one's telling the truth. Now, there's some people who think that they have scientific training even though they don't, and so they know exactly the way it is, and they will tell you. But I'm going to tell you right now, I do not have the scientific knowledge to discern who's telling the truth and who isn't. And in fact, I believe they all think they are. And it's possible there's a lot of things we just don't know yet. I'm going to make one recommendation. How many of you have looked on a website called MedCram? Anybody? MedCram. Nobody. Wow. MedCram is a website that has been put together by Dr. Roger Solholt. I don't know if I said his name right. He's an Adventist doctor that I believe is a member of the Mentone Church in Southern California. And he has put out a lot of good things, pretty balanced stuff, good information, a lot of stuff on how to treat at home, how to treat coronavirus if they say you got it, how to treat it at home. So you might want to write that down, MedCram, because there's so many things out there, it's hard to know what to believe, and this one is very credible. It's from an Adventist doctor. It's from an Adventist doctor who is pretty conservative. All right? Great controversy. Oh, by the way, remember I said I would tell you In Matthew 24:24, when it said to be false Christs and false prophets, that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. I said, who's the very elect? Well, in Ellen White's writings, she said the very elect are the people who believe in and are overcoming sin in their daily life. So if you are not an overcomer, you can't qualify as the very elect. And so if you're not an overcomer, what do you need to do? You need to go to Christ and say, I'm not where I ought to be. Give me a deeper repentance and give me a deeper conversion and help me to be the very elect. Because if you're not the very elect, it's going to overwhelm you. If you're not the very elect, you won't have that kind of faith and that kind of discernment to listen to that still small voice. No one's going through the time of trouble based on human smarts. You have to be the very elect. You have to be so in tune to God, like Enoch, listening to that still small voice, because that's the only thing that's going to get you through. That and a reliance on a thus saith the Lord. All right. Let me see where. Oh, yeah. Great controversy. This is an interesting passage. I shared it in staff meeting Wednesday. It says, while appearing to the children of men as a great physician who can heal all their maladies, Satan will bring disease and disaster until populous cities are reduced to ruin and desolation. Is it going to get better? Not if we're there. It says, even now he is at work in accidents and calamities by sea and by land, and great conflagrations, and fierce tornadoes, and terrific hailstorms, and tempests, floods, cyclones, tidal waves, and earthquakes in every place and in 1,000 forms. Satan is exercising his power. He sweeps away the ripening harvest, and famine and distress follow. He imparts to the air a deadly taint, and thousands perish by the pestilence. These visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous. And there was one word in that list, great conflagrations. What are those? Sounds like fires, right? So it says, these visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous, and then the great deceiver will persuade men that those who serve God are causing these evils.